Hello, today I will be presenting the results of my bachelor's thesis, which dealt with visualizing animal movement data in virtual reality. So right now we can see my visualization of an example dataset consisting of 12 starlings recorded in the imaging barn in Radolfzell. But in general, my visualization will work with all kinds of different datasets which are recorded in controlled environments. So to start with, we have the animals here. They are shown as more abstract cone shapes with each their own individual color. And we can also see the objects they're sitting on, which are created from a dataset consisting of the vertex positions of the objects that were in the cage when the animal's movement was recorded. Now let's get into what kind of functionalities my visualization offers. So first up, we have the basis or more simplified kind of menu where you can do different things like on pause or pause the time, change the replay speed, basically like this. And you can also see this timeline here, which can be used to navigate within a data section. And we can also on the timeline see different events that my program can recognize. So darker lines indicate events where multiple birds are involved, and the brighter lines indicate events where only a single bird is involved. We can also use other kinds of methods to move in time. For example, we can use these buttons here to skip between events immediately, like this. So we can use them to skip from one to the next event. And we can also use these buttons on the side here to instead, let me get to an interesting point in time, to instead skip by frame. So we can use this to slowly move the animals forward or backwards to see all the details necessary. Additionally, if you want to navigate between different data sections, there's this slider here, which you can use to select a different section and then load the data of said section. These sections basically function as kind of folders in which you can organize the data. So you might have them organized by day or by hour, and they're also good because they allow to have a smaller subset of the data loaded in, so you don't have to have the whole data set loaded in constantly. So this is basically it for the basic movement and time. Next up, we can also select animals. So if I'm looking at my current selection, which is this animal, could also change it to this. So basically the current selection has a red outline around it. So if we do that, we can see the animal's speed and acceleration graph here. So this graph basically moves with the animal in a way. And we can also deactivate or activate both of the speed and acceleration graphs respectively. Additionally, if we have an animal selected, we can also choose to follow that animal. Let me actually skip to a new event so we can have a whole following done. So if we click this, and now I'm basically sitting very close to the animal's viewpoint, and now I can unpause this, and we basically are moving with the animal now. However, the rotation of the camera is currently not affected by this to reduce the dizziness that can easily be caused by artificial VR camera rotation. Next up, we can also modify or show the animal's trajectories. So if we maybe go to another interesting point in time like this, and now we can select if we want to show the trajectories of all elements or only our current selection, or if we don't want them at all, we can also deactivate both. So like this, and we also have the option to change the length of the trajectories via this slider. So you can basically make them very long, which can mean visual clutter, or make them very short if you don't need the whole length. You can also modify the width to basically again reduce visual clutter or make them more fitting for animals of different sizes. We can also change if only the past or the future is shown, so now it's only the future positions and now it's only the past ones. Next up, we have the search for event system, which I already briefly mentioned before, because these are the events that are shown on this timeline here. So here we can basically modify which events will be shown on this timeline. So first up, the current event system that is shown is a speed event with a threshold of 2 meters, so 2 meters per second. So this means basically whenever an animal exceeds a speed of 2 meters per second, it will trigger an event, and depending on like if animals will follow and exceed the threshold shortly after or not, it will be registered as like an individual or a group event. So we can basically change this threshold to, for example, make more events appear on the timeline if we like lower it, or also increase it to show less events. Similar, the acceleration event works exactly the same, meaning it triggers when an animal exceeds this acceleration threshold. So basically, it looks like this for 1 meters or like this for 2 meters per square second. And lastly, we have the special object event. This event works a bit differently from the other events because you first have to select one or a couple of the special objects. So these are basically these gray rectangles that were loaded in by the vertices. So we can select multiple objects like this basically, and then click on find to find points in time where animals get close to them. In this case, it would be finding points in time where animals get 2 meters or closer to the center of like any of the objects. However, this seems to be not the case in this current section, so let me increase the threshold. So now we can basically see the first of these events appearing on the timeline. So basically this will always be the case when, for example, animals are flying over the objects. However, as you might have noticed, you might want to find periods in time where animals get like really close to them, and currently, since we're only looking in the same section, this can be quite cumbersome. So for that, I basically implemented an option that looks for events in all sections. So basically loads in and out each section and checks if any events are found. So if we reduce the threshold here again, maybe, I don't know, 1.5 meters, and then look for find again, now it will basically circle through all sections, starting with our current section and then increasing the count until it finds any event. And basically because of this, it takes a bit longer to load, which is why we have a like current status update here. So apparently we did find an event. So now we have the animal here that is sitting closer to the objects than in the previously recorded section. So yeah. And obviously you could also make this like even closer of a distance. Another thing that is happening here, we have the animal leader count. So right now it's not showing much information since we only found a single individual event that only involved a single animal. So that animal will not count as a leader since no one followed him. So if we instead look again maybe for a speed event, then we will basically have the leadership count for each single animal in this list here. So here we can see, for example, that the starling with the indicator 13B leaded quite a lot more events than the other starlings. So maybe this leads us to believe that he takes more of a leading role. Additionally, we can also look for events that only involve our current selected animal. So if we do this, and let me go back to search for events. So right now we have this animal here selected, the 13B starling. So if we look for find again, now only events will show up on the timeline where this animal is part of the event. So yeah, there's that. Next up, in a similar vein, we have the saved events. So these are basically useful when you find an event that you regard as interesting. For example, this might be interesting. And now you might want to go back to this event at a later point in time and basically save your progress. So for this, you can enter any event name you want here or just leave it empty. Then it will just appear with the current frame number instead as the name. And now we can jump back to this event whenever we want to, even if we are in a different data section. And we can also add notes to this event. So if I click this, I can either write a note with the keyword, which can be cumbersome in VR. So if you do not want that, you can also record audio instead. So if I just use this and say, I don't know, test, then we can use this and say, I don't know, test. Yeah, replay this here, basically to check if our audio is actually working, if our mic is working. And if we hit save and close, basically all of the notes we just edited will be saved alongside this event and the basic information on it in a separate folder, which you can then later on extract to use in different applications. So yeah, these are basically very nice if you want to save multiple events and keep track of them. Next up, we have the environment modification. So here in this section, we basically can change how our room looks and what is in it. So this is especially useful if you're looking at using this for different kinds of datasets. Right now, this room is actually already quite nicely customized for this specific dataset we're currently viewing. However, if you want to load in a different dataset, you might want to change different aspects of the room. For example, you could change the room's dimensions, for example, make it quite a bit larger like this, if you have a dataset that was recorded in a larger space. And you could also change, obviously, the file that is used to load in these objects to have different automatically generated objects. But if you want to instead use objects that are a bit more realistic, or maybe want to use the visualization as a kind of public display where you want to be more visually appealing, you can also choose to load in different kind of objects from object files that you can also place in the corresponding folders. And if you do this, for example, I can select this object, I can spawn these pretty much anywhere I want, like this, and I can move them and also scale them and place them pretty much wherever I want to, either decorate the room or instead to place the objects where they were when the data was recorded to make basically reference to animal's position. So for example, another thing we could use this for, if I don't know, spawn a different object, we can have as many of them as we want in the scene at once. And if I, for example, use this object, I could select it like I did with these objects here and also use it to search for events. So if I don't know, place it here and wait, let me just uncheck this so we are seeing all animals. So if I again look for a special object distance event, maybe even with closer distance, maybe actually a bit longer, like this. Now you can see the first of these events basically appearing. So basically, yeah, this bird gets really close to this, which is why it appears on the timeline. So basically, you can also use these objects to place them wherever you're interested. Like for example, you might want to know, for example, when an animal visits the corner, even though there might not be any object there. So you could place it in the corner and then use it to check when animals get close to that position. Also, in this tab, you can save the current setup basically and reload the positions. So basically, when you have placed objects in a certain kind of way that is basically how you want it, then you can save the positions and reload them whenever you want to, so you don't have to manually place the objects over and over again. So for example, I think right now I have a different kind of setup saved for a different data set, which like includes like larger version of this sphere. So I can use this to like basically reload it whenever I want. Also, we can deactivate the objects here. So if you are not interested in them and they're causing like visual clutter, you can disable them whenever you want to. And you can also disable the UI on the walls like this. So if you dislike it or don't find it useful, you can simply disable it here. And lastly, for the section, we have this scaling slider. So basically what this does, it scales the whole room and everything within it. So if I just use it here, you can see we are basically shrinking, or the room is growing in size. And the same, like you could make it a lot smaller like this. And this is basically useful if you have different kinds of dataset sizes. So let me just bring it close to one again. So for example, if you have like a very large dimensional dataset where it's like instead of meters, it's like kilometers, you might want to make the room appear smaller so it's like easier to traverse and see everything. Yeah, this is basically for that. And then last up, in the general settings, we also have a couple more information or like settings we can change basically. So first up, we can actually show the recorded rotation of the animals. Right now, the rotation is basically simulated by the animal looking in whichever direction it is going. Since the dataset I used for this is actually quite messy in that way, so you can see here the animals are rotating quite extremely. So if you do not want that kind of look, because maybe this is not showing you that much, you could also use the approximated rotation instead. You can also change this to like change how much of the animal's information is displayed here. So you could like disable this kind of info field that allows you to follow an animal, and you can also disable the basically mark of a leading animal. So if I do this and then I don't know, skip to the next event. No, we're at the end of the section. We skip to the next event. So basically the leading animal for each event will get this red marker above its head to like indicate this was the like first animal who triggered the event. And we can also disable this marker if we want to. So like this, basically if you do not want any kind of indicators over the animal, you can basically disable both. Lastly, we have this checkbox here, which basically influences whether or not you will go to only the bigger events involving multiple animals marked in dark, or like all of the events on the timeline via these buttons here. So right now it's ticked, so it will only jump to events that involve multiple animals like this. So it will basically move between the like darker lines like this. So it basically skipped over these two. But if you want to like navigate between all the events, you can uncheck this, and now it should go between like all of the events. So right now we see it go here, then there, then there. So this is also obviously useful if you're only viewing a singular animal, a single animal. So yeah, and this is basically it for the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for listening.